If you're applying for GRC jobs right now and hearing nothing back, I want to show you exactly where the process is breaking. Not motivation, the actual mechanics. Because here's what I've watched happen over and over. People spend 8 months collecting certifications, apply to 40 jobs with the same resume, get nothing, and conclude they're not good enough. That's almost never the problem. The problem is they're applying to the wrong titles with the wrong evidence in the wrong order. Let's fix all three. First, the honest landscape, because you deserve real numbers instead of hype. As of July 2026, there were roughly 600 entry-level GRC analyst roles posted in the United States. That is a real, non-trivial number of open doors. An entry-level GRC analyst pay in the US averages around $80,000 a year, with most roles landing between about $54,000 at the low end and $100,000 at the high end, depending on city and industry. But here's the part nobody pairs with those numbers. The talent shortage everyone talks about is at the experienced level. Genuinely, entry-level openings are scarcer than the headlines suggest, and plenty of them still ask for 2 years of experience you can't get without the job. That's the paradox. Everything I'm about to tell you is about getting around it. Let's start with what the job actually is, because most applicants have never been told, and it shows in their interviews. A junior GRC analyst does not spend the day hacking anything. A realistic day looks like this. You come in and check whether any regulation or framework you're subject to changed. You update documentation so that when the auditor asks for evidence, it exists. You chase people. Genuinely, a large part of the entry-level job is coordinating audit interviews and making sure the right leaders actually sign the documents they said they'd sign. In the afternoon, you might sit with a project team and translate. They want to launch something, and you're the person who explains which security requirements apply and what they have to do about it. You'll do risk assessments, you'll analyze data for gaps, you'll build reports for management. Notice what that list is made of. Organization, documentation, follow-through. Translating between technical people and business people. If you have ever project managed anything, chased signatures, or explained a complicated rule to someone who didn't want to hear it, you have done a version of this work. That is your bridge, and almost nobody uses it. Now, the single most expensive mistake I see, applying to the wrong job titles. If you type GRC analyst into a job board and apply to whatever comes up, you're competing against people with 2 to 5 years of experience for roles that were never meant for beginners. You will lose that fight almost every time, and you'll conclude the field is closed. It isn't. You're knocking on the wrong doors. The titles that actually hire beginners are Junior GRC Analyst, GRC Associate, Compliance Coordinator, Compliance Analyst, and Junior Security Analyst. Say those out loud because they're your real search terms. Compliance Coordinator in particular is the one people skip, and it's often the most winnable. It's heavy on the organizing and document chasing I just described, which is exactly the part you can already do. Search those 5 titles specifically. Set alerts on them. That one change by itself puts you in front of hiring managers who are actually looking for someone without a background. If that's already more specific than the advice you've been getting, subscribe. I do one of these every week, and the whole channel is built for people trying to get in, not people already inside. Now, certifications. This is where the most time and money gets burned. Get one foundational certification. 1. The 2 that make sense are CompTIA Security Plus, or ISC2's Certified in Cybersecurity. Either one proves you know the vocabulary, what a control is, what a risk register is, what an audit finding looks like. That's genuinely all a first cert needs to do. What you should not do is start with CISA or CISSP. Those are excellent certifications, and they are not beginner certifications. CISSP in particular has a multi-year experience requirement, standing between you and the actual credential. Chasing them first is how people spend a year and still can't apply to anything new. And then stop. Seriously, the instinct after finishing one cert is to immediately start another because studying feels like progress and applying feels like rejection. But one relevant certification plus evidence you've applied it beats 5 certifications with nothing behind them, every single time. The trap is collecting credentials instead of building ability, which brings us to the part that actually separates candidates. Evidence. Framework familiarity is assumed now. Putting ISO 27001 and NIST on your resume doesn't distinguish you because everyone applying has done that. What distinguishes you is proof you can make a decision under real constraints. So build one project, not 5. One finished properly. Pick a scenario. It can be completely realistic rather than real. Do an access review of your own cloud storage. Do a risk assessment of a fictional 20-person startup. Do a governance review of an AI tool you personally use. None of those require a job, a company, or permission. Then write it up in a specific shape. What was the scenario? What did you have to assume because you couldn't verify it? What constraints were you working under? Were no budget, no headcount, a business that said no? What did you find? What did you recommend? And then the part that matters most, that almost everyone leaves out. What did you trade away? Anyone can write implement multi-factor authentication. A GRC professional writes, I recommended MFA on admin accounts first rather than everywhere because the help desk couldn't absorb the ticket volume that quarter. I accepted the residual risk on standard accounts and I set a date to revisit it. That second version demonstrates judgment. Real GRC work lives in the gray areas where 2 controls conflict or the business pushes back, and showing your reasoning through a trade-off is the exact thing a certification cannot test for. It is the most convincing artifact you can put in front of a hiring manager, and it costs you nothing but a weekend. There's a free template linked below that walks you through that structure, including a fully worked example so you can see what finished looks like before you start. Now let's talk about the application itself, because good candidates lose here too. Most resumes get filtered before a person reads them. So take the job posting and mirror its actual language. If it says control testing, your resume says control testing, not verified security stuff. Not to game a robot, but because the person reading after the filter is scanning for whether you speak the language of the role. Quantify anything you can. Not helped with audits, but coordinated evidence collection across 4 departments for a 12-week audit cycle. Numbers make experience legible even when it came from a completely different industry. And lead with your industry, don't apologize for it. If you came from healthcare, you already understand what regulatory pressure feels like. You lived HIPAA. Finance, you already understand controls and why segregation of duties exists. Retail or hospitality, you've enforced procedures across people who didn't want to follow them, which is half of compliance. That background is an asset, and the candidates who frame it that way stand out against the ones who open with, I'm new to this. Okay, so let's say all of that works and you get the interview. Nobody prepares people for this part, so let me give you the 3 questions you will almost certainly face and what a good answer actually sounds like. Question 1. Walk me through how you'd approach a risk assessment. The instinct is to recite a framework. Don't lead with that. Lead with scope and stakeholders because that's what a real assessment starts with. Something like, first I'd find out what's actually in scope and what isn't. Then who owns those systems? Then what the business is most afraid of losing. Then I'd map what I found against a framework. And name one you actually know. Ending with a framework instead of opening with it signals you've thought about the work rather than memorized a diagram. Question 2, and this is the one that quietly decides interviews. Tell me about a time you had to deal with someone who didn't want to cooperate. They are not testing your security knowledge. Compliance is the function that asks busy people to do extra work, and they are checking whether you fold or whether you get aggressive when someone pushes back. Use a real story from any job you've ever had. Retail, nursing, hospitality, anything. The structure that works. Here was the resistance. Here's why they were actually resisting. Here's how I got the outcome anyway without blowing up the relationship. That answer is worth more than any certification you could name. Question 3. What would you do if you found something serious and your manager told you to ignore it? There's a trap on both sides here. Say you'd go straight over their head and you sound unmanageable. Say you'd drop it and you've just failed the ethics test that this entire profession exists for. The honest answer is the middle. I'd make sure it was documented. I'd make sure I understood their reasoning because there may be context I don't have. And if it stayed unresolved and the risk was serious, I'd escalate through whatever formal channel the company has. Because the entire point of the role is that decisions get recorded and someone accountable accepts the risk in writing. That answer shows you understand what governance is for. And one thing to bring your project. Actually bring it. Say I ran an assessment on this. Can I walk you through what I found and the call I made? Almost no entry-level candidate does that, and it converts the interview from an interrogation into a conversation about work you've already done. Last thing, a realistic timeline, because unrealistic ones are why people quit. Plan on something like 6 to 12 months from standing start to first offer, if you're consistent. Roughly 2 to 3 months for the foundational certification. A couple of weekends for your first real project. Then a genuine application campaign. Targeted, tailored, tracked, rather than mass applying and hoping. And expect the first role to be adjacent rather than perfect. A compliance coordinator seat, an audit support role, a help desk position at a company with a real compliance function. That's not a consolation prize, that's the door. Once you're inside with a year of real GRC exposure, the second job is a completely different conversation. And that's the one where the salary numbers I quoted earlier start applying to you. So, to put it together, search the 5 titles that actually hire beginners. Get one foundational certification, then stop. Build one finished project that shows a trade-off. Mirror the posting's language and lead with your industry. Give it 6 to 12 honest months. You are not behind because you lack another certification. You've been stuck because nobody told you the resume was never the bottleneck. The evidence was. Go build one piece of it this week. The template's below, and I'll see you in the next one.